Hi, everyone. Just wanted to thank you all for joining us today for the ELA Remote Learning Webinar number 2 in the series. I just wanted to record a quick video just in case you want to share this video with your school or any of your colleagues. Feel free to do that, or even if you just want to review kind of what we went over today during the webinar. So it was great to see everyone. Everyone was using the chat function to talk about things that they've learned virtually and with technology so far. We went through our norms for the webinar and then specifically rooted today's webinar, as we did the last one, in this question of what are some best practices and resources to adapt as we shift to remote learning for ELA. And for today's webinar, and specifically, we really wanted to focus on the 3 goals listed below, which are acknowledge the shift away from the Regents exam for June 2020 and reflect on what that means for our instruction. We reviewed the defining the monster remote unit plan and just chatted about ways that you can adapt it and you can access it for your remote classroom. And then we took about 10-15 minutes to really share best practices and tips amongst the community, which was great. And I downloaded that chat also. So if you just want to reach out to me as well, I can email that over to you, the transcript of that, because it was really interesting and great to see teachers connect and share resources across the city. So we really kind of did a temperature check and we talked about kind of like how we were feeling and how our students were feeling about the shift away from the Regents exam. And obviously the Regents, more fortunately or unfortunately, has been a northern star for a lot of our schools with their planning and what they want students walking away from. So that's really shifted, and we talked about all of our schools are around the city are doing different shifting in a different way, but we really wanted. We posed the question of what do you want students to walk away from this year learning to all the teachers on the webinar, and really thinking about fleshing that out as far as content, as far as literacy, as far as technology, which is a completely new skill set that we haven't necessarily been developing with our students just because we've been in physical spaces with them. And then also, very important, the social emotional learning and thinking about target goals that we want students walking away from the school year having accomplished and having mastered by the end of the school year. So there's more to come on that eventually down the road, but we just wanted to pose that to teachers to really start thinking about that. And it seemed like everybody on the call was at different places and thinking about that. Some teachers were like, yeah, I know exactly where I'm going. And some teachers were like, yeah, I still, everything has shifted away from the region. So I need to figure that out. So we went through and we started navigating the defining the monster, the argument unit. And I'll just pull that up right here and really just spoke to how to navigate that unit plan. And that was basically looking at the learning targets for the unit, which is really talking about analyzing antagonists and explaining their motivation and purpose within society, developing a claim and using evidence to support it, composing a coherent argumentative paragraph or essay, and then using rhetoric, using rhetorical devices within the audience. So we just went through that and talked about the difference between if teachers wanted to access it for synchronous learning, the student handouts, which are there for asynchronous learning, or a lot of teachers around the city are doing a blended model, so they can use the scripted synchronous part of the learning plan and directly transfer that into Google Classroom, which a lot of teachers are using, or they might want to disseminate the handouts in a way to whether that's through email or through Classroom and do it that way too. So we spoke about those options. We looked at the calendar and we talked about how teachers might adapt it. And one question that came up a bunch in the conversation was also, is this a ninth grade unit? Is this a 12th grade unit? And that really depends on the text that you're pairing. Perhaps you only want to use one text, right, to show how the monster, analyze the monster in order to show how that monster is a representation of the society's fears. And then if you want to go to 12th grade, we had some teachers talking about research and really having them look at literary monsters across time and doing research around that. So it really is, it could be applicable to a lot of different grades and scenarios with teaching. So that was one adaptation for the unit plan that we spoke to. We talked about extending it into a writer's workshop, which is completely fine. And then also talking about alternative assessment, right? So maybe it's not an essay and maybe it's not a paragraph, but thinking about using video and having students record themselves, using rhetoric, creating a poster, or even doing a debate where you can have two different students, right? The task is really for students to identify and define a monster in current society and explain how and argue how that definition is more or less a culmination, a personification of the fears of our society. So you'll have students who have completely different monsters um, that they can even debate and really argue and use that rhetoric a bit more in discourse. So that is also an option. So like I said, we did some shout outs and sharing ideas. We used the micro routine such as React, where teachers reacted or responded to a question in the chat, and then we used 3 minutes to read through and then respond to one person with an @ symbol using the sentence starter. I like it when you said. So it was a modeling of a routine that two of our ISs use. They put together their micro routines. So we use one of these and hoping that teachers can also start embedding routines within their daily instruction as well. So that was great. And like I mentioned before, if you would like to see any of that chat, if you weren't able to download it, I could send that over, the transcript over to you. You can just shoot me an email, which is great. So our question was, what has worked so far? So we had some teachers talking about different online platforms that they've used, texts that are really engaging for students, how they've built out routines, sharing TED Talks and SEL resources, which was great also. So some shout outs in the slides. There are 2 links or 3 links to one is the micro routines, which is a menu that our middle school team put together that can easily be adapted to high school. So that's the first link. Our other remote learning plan, the me, myself, and the personal statement, which is what the webinar number 1 was on, is also there. And then we spoke to youth communications and how it's a really accessible text list of students writing around the city. So it's great to use those texts also just because it's great for students also to see student voice embedded into classrooms. And then we chatted questions and we just spoke about different platforms and that was about it. So we took an attendance. Remember just to do the feedback form because that's how I'm going to be recording attendance. Quickly plugged that New Visions is also hiring, so feel free to head over there if you're interested at looking at open positions. And then just spoke very quickly about what is up next. So the next unit will be a literary movement. We'll be looking at realism and definitely trying to write that assessment to relate to what's happening today so that students can use characteristics of that movement to embed into their own writing. So it'll be a little bit more of a creative writing with alternative assessment, of course. But we'll talk about also just the next webinar is on May 5th. So that is linked in as well if you would like to register. And then office hours I'll be holding tomorrow. Sorry, that says Thursday, but actually on Wednesday, tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So feel free to stop by. I will be just sitting on that Zoom and teachers can pop in and out, ask questions, say hello, whatever that might be. But it was lovely once again to speak and see you all. I really look forward to working with all of you again, hopefully on the 5th. And then if not, definitely when hopefully we return to the office sooner than later. So I wish you all well and please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you so much.